I would find it in drawers. I would find it in boxes that we had put into a storage unit that were really no more than things that I had just kind of like scraped off the counter into a bin because somebody was coming over and I didn't want them to see all the piles of paperwork that we had. And within those piles was like just the most random stuff. And I know I'm not the only one. When it comes to paper, I think there is a very small percentage of the population who is actually excited to deal with it. Like a really small percentage of the population who just cannot wait to dig into it. If you are one of those people that just loves dealing with paper, then this is not the video for you. This video is for the people who know that paper is not just paper and that we aren't always in control. We are going to talk about a couple of barriers to decluttering paper in our homes, as well as a sort of light bulb moment that I had regarding our paper clutter and how that relates to our faith. Well, hello friend, I'm Mary Beth from At What Cost, where we are learning to apply God's truths to our everyday lives. And the best way that our family has learned to do that is by adapting to a more minimalistic lifestyle. And as I went from category to category throughout our home, room to room, I seemed to always find at least two different types of things. So the first thing is sentimental items. We're going to talk about that next week. This is part of the Clutter Free January challenge that the Minimal Mom has put together. So this week is week 3. We're talking about paper clutter. Next week is week 4, the last week. Oh, so sad. I have enjoyed this challenge so much. But next week we're talking about sentimental items. Today we're talking about paper. Those two things seem to permeate throughout my house. Didn't matter where we went. There was some form of paper clutter wherever we were, whether it was a crumpled up Taco Bell receipt or something that seemed unbelievably significant. So as you're going through this playlist, there are just a tremendous amount of tips and tricks and ways that you can get your paper under control. And rest assured, you will find a system that works for you. Just going through this playlist myself, I have a renewed hope for getting our paper clutter under control and organized. And trust me, it's come a long way. The problem has been for me that there's a couple of barriers that I don't always think we talk about when it comes to paper clutter. The first is that paper is not always paper. Sometimes we have things that feel like the weight of our world is on our shoulders if we keep it or if we get rid of it. Let me give you an example of how paper is not just paper in our home. So I have 3 boys that we adopted from foster care, which means prior to our finalization and then becoming officially part of our family, I had a ridiculous amount of paperwork to keep up with. There were things that I had to keep up with for our adoption agency. There were other things that I had to keep up with for the state. There's paperwork, there's medical stuff. And then when we do finalize, there's child life histories. And now we also add IEPs into the mix. And so there's all of this paperwork that's associated with something that, to be honest, is just difficult to think about. We don't really think on a regular basis about the time period in our kids' lives before they came to us. Every time I have to pick up those child life histories, though, I think about those times. And it doesn't necessarily have to be this. Maybe it's medical documentation from a diagnosis that really changed the course of your life. Maybe it's, I don't know, legal like there's a lot of things out there that come in the form of paper that can really trip us up. Full disclosure here, friends, I totally mind ninja myself when it comes to my kids' IEPs. It can feel as though if I don't keep those, catalog them, and make sure that I have every last detail of that IEP, it may not go the right way. And what will I go back to? What will I draw from? How will I hold people accountable? And what if they don't make any progress? It's probably going to be my fault because I didn't hang on to those things. The fact of the matter is, it's entirely the wrong way to look at it. Doesn't mean that I don't look at it that way. The next barrier is that we are not always in control of our paper for one reason or another. So I don't live by myself. I have a spouse who has opinions and routines and habits and things that he deems to be important about paper as well. And so the system that I may choose to use may not jive with his organizational style, his values, the things that he really thinks about when it comes to paper. So getting on the same page with paper and how you want to handle it, and it just can open up a whole nother can of worms when we're dealing with someone else living in our home and trying to figure out how we navigate the things that happen in life. And unfortunately, that means the things that come through the mailbox too. The next barrier that comes up oftentimes for me is that changing the way that we deal with paper in our home really can be a lifestyle change. And anytime we want to make a change to our habits or just our outlook, the way that we operate from day to day, the details of our lives, changing those things can be incredibly difficult. At this point, we are about 3 weeks into January, and anyone who set a New Year's resolution knows what I'm talking about. We have the best of intentions in setting up some of these systems, and we can make them very easy to do. But if our natural inclination is to sit in our favorite chair in the evening and open up the envelopes and put things in this pile and other things in that pile, it's going to take an active, conscious effort to change the way that we do that. And it can be easy to do that. We can find really good resources to help us change our behaviors, but it does take time and it does take effort. If we're already taxed in a lot of other ways, that effort may not be as robust and resilient as it could be if we have decluttered some of the other areas of our home, or at least dealt with some of the barriers that we have already talked about. I had this sort of light bulb moment in our Sunday school class on Sunday. We're studying 1 Peter. And so we're talking about having this imperishable inheritance. So we know that everything in this life is fleeting. This is all just temporary. Even though these things hang us up, we know that our hope has to be securely anchored outside of this very real timeline that we are in. What does this have to do with paper? Well, we started talking about a man who has a USB drive with over $200 million or whatever in Bitcoin, digital currency, huge amount of money, password encrypted. He threw away the sheet that has the password on it. He can't access any of that wealth. Isn't that what we really are afraid of when it comes to paper? Whether I'm trying to get rid of these IEPs, trying to decide how best to store the child life histories or any of the paperwork from the time that our kids were in foster care, I can sometimes build this up to be the equivalent of throwing away my inheritance. What if I get rid of this and I actually need it? Well, this is where our faith comes into play. Facing some of the questions that we may have when it comes to important documents, or really even deciding whether or not a document is important, can sometimes be like circling the drain of what if. Growing in our Christian walk is really about relying less on ourselves and really looking to God and understanding His provision for us. So the question of what if is one that we can ponder and ask, but we don't always want to just set up camp and live there. We know that God is sovereign, and we aren't going to throw something away and thwart any of his plans. We also are going to be able to endure whatever comes as a result of this. You know, I cannot begin to imagine the devastation of feeling like you have this amount of wealth and you can't obtain it. Compare that with what we really do read in 1 Peter, though, that we have an inheritance. If you really dwell in that and spend some time thinking, really thinking on the inheritance that we have in our salvation and the fact that it is securely anchored in heaven for us, we have already obtained that. It really doesn't matter what we keep and what we throw away in this life. We're good. That is where our hope lies. That is why Peter talks about a living hope. This isn't something that is going to go through the shredder and be lost forever, and we're just going to be in a desperate situation the whole rest of our lives. So as you're moving through this playlist, I just want to encourage you to remember that your hope is not in any of the filing cabinets or systems that you put in place, that our hope and our inheritance is securely anchored in heaven through the blood of Jesus Christ, and that at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what we keep or discard. God is sovereign, everything is going to be okay, and we can totally keep moving through this difficult task of handling all of the paper in our homes. I am so glad that you stopped by today. If you have not yet subscribed, I would love for you to do that. You can click the button right here, that one right there with my face on it. That's the one. Click that one. And if you enjoyed this video, you can click the like button. The playlist is right here for the rest of the paper clutter. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.